Welcome to her Fireside Stories, wishing you a wonderful listening experience. How would you feel if your own child threw you out of your home on Mother's Day? I spent decades working two jobs to build a home filled with memories and love. I never thought the son I raised alone would betray me in the cruelest way possible. Leaving me homeless on the day meant to celebrate mothers always thought Mother's Day was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a day when children proudly hand you handmade cards or deliver bright bouquets of flowers telling you how much they love you, how grateful they are for your existence. It was that way for me once when my son Adrian was small. I still have the construction paper card he made in second grade, a clumsy crayon-drawn heart on the front, his large loopy signature on the inside. I've kept it in a shoebox for decades. Back then, I lived in a modest townhouse near the local elementary school. I worked two jobs housekeeping during the day and a part-time cashier shift at the grocery store in the evenings just to keep a roof over our heads. Adrian would wait for me at Mrs. Jeffrey's home, the kind neighbor who volunteered to babysit him until I returned. Even in those scrappy years, we always found some way to celebrate Mother's Day. A small cake or a pot of daisies or just a hug. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that one day, on the very morning of Mother's Day, I would be standing in the rain, evicted from my own house by my own son. It's strange how life twists and tangles. The once beautiful threads of family love. My husband passed away when Adrian was only 7. We struggled so much, but we got through it. Adrian was my pride and joy, and I poured everything into him. My time, my money, my heart. I wanted him to have every opportunity. I never did. Perhaps that was where I made my mistake. By the time Adrian graduated from college, I had managed to buy a modest single-story home in the suburbs. It needed repairs, but it was ours. He continued his education, went to graduate school, and eventually landed a corporate job that paid well enough for a comfortable life. I was proud of him. Somewhere along the line, though, his visits became less frequent. He barely called. When he did, it was always about something he needed me to sign or something he needed me to invest in. Mom, just co-sign this loan for me. Okay, it's gonna help me start my own business. Mom, can I borrow the old car? I'll pay you back for the new tires. I promise, Mom, I need the down payment for this house. It's a surefire investment. I'll return it in a year. I gave and gave, hoping to stay relevant in his life, hoping he wouldn't forget the bond we shared. In retrospect, I see how I clung to the idea that being a dutiful mother meant unconditional sacrifice. I never once stopped to protect myself. I never questioned whether Adrian's intentions might be self-serving. Then about a year ago, he asked me to sign a set of documents related to a family trust for property management. He said it would safeguard the house against potential liabilities, ensure that if anything happened to me, the house would remain safely in the family. Mom, you know how complicated estate laws can get, he said with that charming grin. This is just to protect you. You trust me, right? And of course I did. I signed those papers without so much as a second glance at the fine print. Looking back, I realized that was the moment I effectively handed over my nest egg, handed over the very roof above my head. Months passed and I noticed subtle shifts. Adrian started coming around more often, but not to see me. He would be on the phone in the living room, whispering about property evaluations and prospective buyers. I brushed it off, telling myself he must be discussing a new business venture or maybe a friend's real estate project. Then came Mother's Day morning. I woke up early, excited in my old-fashioned way. I may be over 60, but some sentimental part of me still lit up at the thought. This is Mother's Day, the day I became a mother. My son might drop by with a small surprise. My excitement wilted the moment I heard knocks. No pounds on my door. I opened it to find Adrian standing with a stern-looking woman in a black suit. A lawyer, I guessed, Behind them were two burly men, the kind you might hire to do heavy lifting or private security. My heart hammered in my chest, a silent alarm of dread. Adrian, honey, what's going on? I asked, forcing a small smile. He wouldn't look me in the eye. His gaze skittered across the porch as he spoke. Mom, we need you to vacate the house immediately. The deed has been transferred to me. I blinked, not quite understanding. Transferred. What do you mean, vacate? This is my home. The lawyer cleared her throat. By the terms of the contract you signed last year, the property belongs to the trust over which Adrian has primary control. He's chosen to exercise the clause that permits him to claim residency for the purpose of sale or personal use. Ms. Davenport, we're very sorry to inform you of this on such short notice, but legal processes have been followed. Adrian looked away, his lips pressed into a thin line. I'm sorry, Mom, but I need the capital. I've got some debts to pay off, and this is the best way. Maybe you can stay with Aunt Linda or something. My mind spun, and for a few seconds, it was as if the world had gone silent, except for the thudding of my heart. My own son was telling me to leave my home. My name was no longer on the deed. I realized the papers I'd signed, the so-called family trust. They were likely the gateway to my own eviction. I tried to speak, but tears came first. Rain dripped from the porch awning, soaking into my slippers. Adrian, it's Mother's Day. I managed my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He just motioned to the two men. They walked past me into the house, and I heard them rummaging around. Minutes later, they began bringing out boxes of my belongings, my old photos, my clothes, my memories all packed up and dropped unceremoniously into the driveway. I stood there in shock, feeling the cold morning drizzle seep through my thin robe. Part of me wanted to scream at Adrian, to rage against the betrayal. Another part of me felt numb. This was my child, the little boy I'd loved unconditionally for decades. The same boy who wrote, "I love you, Mom," in giant green letters on a pink card all those years ago. Finally, as the men reappeared with more boxes, I turned to Adrian one last time. I asked quietly, "Why?" He sighed. "Because it's mine legally. You shouldn't have any trouble finding somewhere else. You've always been resourceful." Then, without another word, Adrian and the lawyer went inside the house and shut the door. My door, the door that I painted sky blue, the door that once had a welcome sign for my neighbors. I collapsed onto the wet curb, staring at the boxes that contained the remnants of my life. Something inside me cracked a deep fissure in my soul. Mother's Day. Indeed, I'm not sure how long I sat in the driveway that morning. The next thing I remember was the voice of Mr. Perez, my neighbor across the street. He was standing over me holding a large umbrella. His face was etched with concern. "Anna, are you okay? I saw men loading boxes. What's going on?" I looked up at him, trying to find words. Rainwater dripped down my chin, mixing with tears I'd lost track of. I tried to stand, but my knees wobbled. Mr. Perez quickly grabbed my arm, steadying me. "Let's get you out of this rain," he said gently. With his help, I shuffled to the trunk of my old car, an aging sedan that my son had once borrowed for months. I opened it, placing a few boxes inside. My hands trembled as I worked, rummaging for anything essential: wallet keys, a few clothes. A memory flickered the day I bought that car nearly 15 years ago. Adrian had been so grateful. "Mom, you're the best," he said, hugging me tight. He needed a vehicle for job interviews, and I had used part of my savings to make the purchase. A wave of bitterness threatened to overpower me, but I swallowed it down. Mr. Perez offered his home as a temporary refuge. "My wife can make you some tea and you can calm down a bit," he suggested. I hesitated. Should I accept? Pride tugged at me. This was humiliating, to be homeless on Mother's Day in front of the entire neighborhood, but I had nowhere else to go. I slung my purse over my shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered, eyes lowered in shame. Inside the Perez home, warmth and the smell of lemon-scented cleaner greeted me. I sank into a floral-patterned sofa, noticing the crocheted doilies on the armrests. Mrs. Perez hurried in wearing a concerned look that mirrored her husband's. She pressed a mug of chamomile tea into my hands. "Anna dear, drink this, and please tell us what happened." I sipped slowly, letting the fragrant warmth spread through my chest. The question hovered in the air. How do I explain that my own son kicked me out? So I started from the beginning, speaking in a shaky voice. The trust documents the deception, my confusion, Mr. and Mrs. Perez listened quietly, their expressions darkening with every word. By the time I finished, Mrs. Perez was wiping tears from her eyes. "This is unbelievable," Mr. Perez said, his voice trembling in anger. "We watched Adrian grow up in that house. I can't imagine him doing this to you." I could only nod, feeling hollow. There were no words to capture the depth of betrayal that choked my heart. "You can stay in our guest room for now," Mrs. Perez insisted, "at least until you figure out your next steps." I hesitated. "I appreciate it, but I don't want to impose. I might just gather my things and drive somewhere else, maybe to my sister Linda's place in the next state." However, Aunt Linda's health wasn't the best. She was in a small apartment. Would I truly burden her with my sudden arrival? The mere thought of it weighed heavily on me. Mrs. Perez patted my hand. "That's what neighbors do. We help each other. Please, Anna, just for tonight at least." I bowed my head in gratitude. "Thank you. I can't tell you how much this means." The rest of that day passed in a fog. Mrs. Perez coaxed me into eating some soup, and I forced down a few spoonfuls. It tasted like ashes on my tongue. My mind couldn't stop replaying Adrian's face, the tightness around his mouth, the way he refused to look me in the eyes. By evening, I sat alone in the Perez guest bedroom, a neat little space with soft yellow walls and a crocheted blanket on the bed. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. In a normal world, I would have spent this Mother's Day having dinner with my son, maybe receiving a small gift, a framed picture of us, or a letter telling me he loved me. Instead, I was living under someone else's roof, wondering how everything had turned so wrong. I rummaged through one of the boxes I'd managed to grab. Inside was my shoebox of memories. Carefully, I lifted the lid. The old pink construction paper card lay on top, edges frayed but the crayon heart still bright. I ran my fingers over the childlike letters. "I love you, Mom." The date was scrawled inside May 10th, 1998. Adrian would have been 7. A sob tore from my throat and I buried my face in my hands. In the silence, my heart hammered with sorrow, but also with something unexpected, a faint flicker of anger, righteous anger, the kind that tells you this is not how your story should end. I realized I had to find a way forward. I still had my car, a little bit of savings in the bank, and maybe I had some legal recourse. Those documents I signed, could it be undone? Or was I truly powerless? The next morning, I woke at dawn. My eyes felt gritty from crying, and my back ached from the unfamiliar mattress. But the moment I opened my eyes, I remembered everything, and a heaviness settled over me again. I tiptoed out to the kitchen, hoping not to wake the Perezes. Even so, I found Mr. Perez reading the newspaper at the table. He offered me a gentle smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Like I've lost my whole world," I admitted. I never imagined I could be homeless at my age, especially not because of my own child. He nodded sympathetically. "I've been thinking. It might be wise to consult a lawyer. You said you didn't read the fine print on those papers, but maybe there's a loophole." I paused. A lawyer. The cost alone made me cringe. My finances weren't great, especially after all the money I'd poured into Adrian's ventures. But if I stood any chance of getting my home back, I might have to fight. "Yes, I agreed, though." My voice wavered. "I need to try." I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls. I dialed one legal aid center after another, leaving messages hoping for a call back. Most places were closed because it was still technically the weekend. Some offices indicated they'd be open. Monday. By noon, I'd scheduled one appointment for a brief consultation on Tuesday afternoon. It was a start. That afternoon, I gathered enough courage to drive past my house. My house, or was it still mine? The sight jolted me. A for sale sign was already planted in the front yard. Adrian didn't waste any time. My flowers, bright yellow marigolds, I had planted weeks ago, still lined the walkway. The windows I had carefully cleaned the previous month gleamed in the sunlight. It all looked so deceptively serene, as if it were waiting for a buyer to come appreciate what I had built with my blood, sweat, and tears. My heart pounded. In that moment, a firm resolve took root in me. If Adrian thought I would silently vanish, he was mistaken. I might be an older woman, I might be naive when it comes to fine print, but I was not spineless. If there was any legal or moral right to claim, I would find it. And so, under the blazing afternoon sun, I promised myself, he will regret doing this to me, and I won't rest until I've taken back what's mine or found a way to make him face the consequences. Monday came, and I faced it with a determined grimace. Thanks to the Perez's, I had a warm bed for one more night and a cup of coffee to start my day. I put on a clean blouse and slacks from my suitcase. Even if my world was in shambles, I intended to face my problems with dignity. First on the list was to visit my bank. My checking account had a modest sum enough to get me through a couple of months if I lived frugally. I had some hope that maybe Adrian hadn't drained my savings, but I needed to be sure. With shaky hands, I presented my ID to the teller. "Good morning, Miss Davenport," she greeted. "How can we help you today?" "I'd like to check my account balance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She tapped at her keyboard, then gave me the information in a reassuringly neutral tone. I exhaled in relief. Adrian at least hadn't touched this account. It was in my name alone. I'd been so naive with the house, but I had never shared this particular fund. My heart eased a notch, though it still hammered with stress. Next, I swung by the supermarket. I stocked up on non-perishable items, canned soup crackers, peanut butter things I could keep in my trunk if needed. The idea of not having a fridge or a kitchen was terrifying, but I decided to prepare for the worst. At precisely 1:45 p.m., I arrived at the small law office in the downtown district. The sign above the door read East Bridge Legal Aid. It was a cramped space with a flickering neon open sign. Inside, a middle-aged woman in a floral blouse sat behind a reception desk. "Appointment for Ms. Anna Davenport," I told her. She checked a notebook and nodded. "Yes, with Mr. Johnston." "Have a seat, he'll be with you shortly." Minutes later, a tall, bespectacled man in a slightly rumpled suit came out to greet me. "Ms. Davenport, I'm John Johnston." He offered a warm handshake. In his small office, I recounted the entire ordeal. The so-called trust documents, the eviction, the sign on my lawn. As I spoke, I noticed his brows furrow deeper and deeper. "Let me see the paperwork you have," he requested. I handed him copies of the trust agreement that I'd found in my files. Thankfully, I'd been meticulous enough to keep a personal copy. He skimmed through, his lips pursed. After 10 minutes of concentrated reading, he sighed. "Miss Davenport, this is complicated," he began. My stomach twisted. "Is there any chance I can fight this?" He tapped the page. "You see this clause here? It states that upon your signing, you forfeited direct ownership to the trust, placing your son, Adrian, as the primary trustee with full discretionary powers." I stared. "So he can just throw me out?" John removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Legally, if everything was done above board, yes. Unless we find evidence of fraud, coercion, or misrepresentation." My shoulders slumped. He lied to me about what I was signing. "Isn't that fraud?" He gave a sympathetic shrug. "Proving it might be tough. We'd need witnesses or written evidence showing that Adrian deliberately misled you. If he can claim you understood and signed willingly, a court might side with him. The conversation continued for another half hour. John spelled out possible legal strategies, but they were all long shots. They also required money court fees, possibly private investigators' depositions. My meager savings account would be drained in no time. By the end of the meeting, I felt more hopeless than ever. If I can't win, what are my options? I asked quietly. He leaned back in his chair. Sometimes it's not just about winning the property back. It's about negotiating, or even bringing public pressure. If moral wrongdoing is clear, you might consider something like that, or you can attempt a settlement. Maybe ask for a portion of the proceeds if he sells the house. Settlement. The word tasted sour in my mouth. Why should I settle when this was my home, my life? But I was also realistic. This man was telling me my odds. He gave me a small, apologetic smile. I'm sorry, Miss Davenport. I wish I had better news. I left the office feeling more determined. If the law wouldn't easily help me, perhaps I needed a different angle. Not all battles are won in court. Some are won in the court of public opinion. But how could I fight my own son publicly without destroying our family name? The notion of exposing Adrian felt both terrifying and strangely empowering. That evening, after returning to the Perez's guest room, I mulled over my options. I could track down close friends and relatives, share my side of the story. I could pen an open letter or reach out to local journalists. It felt drastic, but I was desperate. Amid my swirling thoughts, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, startled to see Adrian's name on the screen. For a moment, I actually felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he wanted to apologize. I answered quietly. Hello? His voice was clipped. Mom, I see you've been talking to lawyers. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I swallowed. You threw me out of my own house on Mother's Day. Are you threatening me? A pause. I'm just telling you it won't do you any good. I have every legal right to do this. There's nothing you can do. My grip tightened on the phone. A mix of heartbreak and fury churned in my chest. Why, Adrian? Why are you doing this? He exhaled sharply. I told you I have debts. I need this money. Plus, you signed everything. It's done. Before I could respond, he hung up. I sat there, the phone pressed against my ear, staring at the blank screen. Hot tears trickled down my cheeks. It was as though my son had become a total stranger. Yet that call did something unexpected. It stoked the embers of my anger into a small flame. Adrian might have the upper hand legally, but he was also worried I might fight back. Otherwise, why call at all? I set the phone down, inhaling a shaky breath. My mind drifted to the trust documents, to the possibility of a settlement. But a quiet voice inside me refused to accept that. This is my home. I've poured my life into it. I won't just walk away. I began making a list of people who knew about my sacrifices, extended relatives who might stand witness that I never intended to sign away my house, old neighbors who saw me pay for the renovations, former co-workers who remembered how I scrimped and saved. Perhaps if I gathered enough testimonies, I could at least pressure Adrian into giving me back a part of what was rightfully mine. I may have been naive, but I wasn't powerless. I refused to be. Despite my newfound resolve, I woke up Tuesday with a pit in my stomach. The air in the guest room felt stagnant. I needed to break free of the overwhelming dread, so I decided to step outside, slip on my sneakers, and take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. The early morning sun had barely risen, and a gentle breeze made the flowers along the sidewalk sway in a silent dance. Each step I took felt heavier than the last. My thoughts drifted from fear to anger, to grief and back again. A part of me wanted to cling to the sweet memories of Adrian's childhood, how he used to chase butterflies in the yard, how he'd beam whenever I praised his artwork. Another part of me wanted to condemn him for what he'd done. It was a war inside my heart, By the time I returned to the Perez's driveway, I saw Mrs. Perez heading out to pick up her morning paper. She greeted me with a sympathetic smile. Anna, you're up early. I managed a small nod, just trying to sort out my thoughts. Over breakfast, the Perezes and I discussed my plans. I revealed my idea of reaching out to friends and family, hoping their collective testimony might at least push Adrian to negotiate. Mr. Perez offered to help me draft a statement or letter if needed. That'd be wonderful, I said. I'm not used to these things, especially not social media or public letters. Around mid-morning, I settled at the small dining table with a notepad. I began writing a rough outline of my story, how I bought the house after years of working 2 jobs, how Adrian had approached me to sign that trust paperwork under false pretenses. I tried to keep the tone factual rather than accusatory, but each sentence felt like a stab in the chest. Mrs. Perez brought me a cup of tea, peering over my shoulder. You should include how you saved for Adrian's college tuition, she suggested gently. He wouldn't be where he is without you. I nodded. Yes, you're right, it took hours, but by late afternoon I had a 2-page draft summarizing my situation. The question was, what next? Should I send it to local news outlets? A few family members posted online. I felt a pang of uncertainty. Putting my private life on display was terrifying. Yet I recalled Adrian's phone call, his cold voice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. If he wanted to silence me, maybe it was time I raised my voice. I decided to start small. I emailed a copy of my statement to 3 local newspapers and to a community blog that covered human interest stories. Then, with trembling hands, I posted a shorter version on my personal social media account. I didn't have many friends there, mostly old colleagues and neighbors, but it was a start. Later that evening, as I paced the Perez's living room, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen was one I recognized but hadn't spoken to in years, Sylvia Patterson. She used to be one of my best friends back in my grocery store, cashier days. I answered cautiously. Hello. Her excited voice rang through Anna. I just read your post. Is it true what happened? A lump formed in my throat. I'm afraid so. This is outrageous, Sylvia fumed. I remember how you scrimped to afford that house. You can stay with me if you want. My spare room is always open. Warmth flooded my chest at her offer. I appreciate it, Sylvia. I'm currently staying with neighbors, but if I need a longer-term place, I'll let you know. She hesitated. Anna, I've got a friend who's a paralegal. Maybe she can help you find a pro bono lawyer or do some extra digging into property records. My eyes filled with grateful tears. That would be incredible. We spoke for another half hour, reconnecting after years of minimal contact. By the time I hung up, I felt just a little bit stronger. Maybe not everyone in my life had turned away. The next morning, I woke to find my social media post had garnered a surprising amount of attention, at least by my humble standards. Dozens of people had left comments expressing sympathy or outrage. Some asked how they could help. A few even shared that they had once faced similar betrayals by loved ones. This surge of support buoyed my spirit, but it also sparked fear in me. What if Adrian saw the post and decided to retaliate? I braced myself for another threatening phone call, but the day passed in a relative calm. That night, Mr. Perez handed me a typed draft of a more formal letter to whom it may concern. My name is Anna Davenport, and I wish to share my story of how I was misled into signing away my home. We worked on it together, refining the language until it was concise yet compelling. If any journalist picked it up, it might turn into a local headline, Son Evicts Mother on Mother's Day. It was sensational enough that it could draw attention, which might put pressure on Adrian. Was I ready for that level of exposure? My stomach churned at the thought, but I felt like I had no choice. If the law offered little hope, perhaps public empathy might drive Adrian to do the right thing, or at least offer me compensation. The following day, my phone rang again this time, with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. A woman's voice introduced herself as Rebecca Hall from the Riverton Weekly Gazette. I came across your letter and social media post. She explained, I'm very sorry about your circumstances. We'd like to run a piece on your story if you're interested in speaking with me. My heart pounded. This was exactly what I'd been aiming for, yet it suddenly felt terrifyingly real. Yes, I'm available, I managed. We arranged a meeting at a local cafe. When I got off the phone, I sat there in a whirl of emotions, equal parts hope and dread. If a local paper covered my story, it might put a spotlight on Adrian's actions. Would he cave under public scrutiny, or would he lash out even more? Either way, I had to do something. I couldn't just fade away into homelessness and obscurity. The next morning, I dressed carefully in a clean blouse and a pair of slacks. Mrs. Perez had lent me my wardrobe was limited now that most of my belongings were in boxes or still in the trunk of my car. I dabbed on a little makeup, hoping to look composed for the interview. The cafe was a small, cozy place with brick walls and wooden tables. Rebecca was already there, a slender woman with glasses perched on her nose. She smiled warmly as I approached Mrs. Davenport. Thank you for meeting me. I'm truly sorry for everything you're going through, she said, extending her hand. I shook it, trying to steady my nerves. Thank you for giving me a chance to share my story. We sat in a corner booth. She set a recording device on the table, explained that she'd like my permission to record for accuracy, and then began asking questions. Her tone was gentle but probing. She wanted details about how I'd raised Adrian, the sacrifices I'd made, the exact timeline of events leading to my eviction. I laid it all out, my voice trembling at times with a mixture of sorrow and anger. She took notes, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions. By the end of the interview, I felt emotionally drained, but also oddly relieved. Speaking it all out loud reminded me that I was not the villain here, and that my story deserved to be heard. Rebecca thanked me and promised to be in touch. As I left, I noticed a slight quiver in my hands. I wasn't sure if it was from adrenaline or fear. My mind kept flashing back to Adrian's earlier words. There's nothing you can do. But I was doing something, and maybe, just maybe, it would matter. The next few days were a whirlwind of cautious optimism and lingering dread. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat, worried it was Adrian. But each time it turned out to be someone else, an old coworker, a distant cousin, or a curious acquaintance from years ago. Word of my story was spreading through social media and local chatter. Mr. Perez told me he'd overheard folks discussing it at the hardware store. My niece Lucy, who lived 2 states away, called me in tears after reading about it online. Aunt Anna, I had no idea Adrian had done this, she said, her voice trembling with anger. If there's anything I can do, tell me. I didn't have a concrete plan for harnessing all these offers of support yet. But simply hearing people say they believed in me gave me a kind of emotional fuel to keep going. For too long, I'd felt powerless, overshadowed by Adrian's confident assurances that nothing could be done. Now I sensed a shifting tide. One evening, just before I headed to bed, Mr. Perez knocked gently on the door of the guest room. Anna, sorry to bother you. We just got a call on the landline. A woman named Rachel. She said she's from a local TV station. I told her I'd pass you the message. My eyes widened. First, a newspaper interview, now local television. My story was gaining serious momentum. I spoke with Rachel the next morning. She explained that the TV station was doing a segment on unthinkable betrayals and wanted to feature me. I hesitated for a solid minute before agreeing. This was an even bigger platform than the newspaper. Adrian would undoubtedly see it, or at least hear about it. The interview was scheduled at the station's studio. I borrowed a more presentable outfit from Mrs. Perez, an elegant blouse and a knee-length skirt, and tried to compose myself in front of the mirror. Deep lines creased the corners of my eyes. New shadows lurked beneath them. I'd aged a decade in the span of a few weeks. At the studio, bright lights and bustling staff greeted me. Rachel, a poised woman in her early 30s, approached with a friendly smile. She guided me to a chair in front of a camera and clipped a microphone to my collar. The interview felt surreal. Rachel asked me to share my entire experience, from my husband's passing to the day I found myself on the curb under the rain. As I spoke, I saw my reflection in one of the monitors, a tired older woman determined to stand up for herself. My voice wavered occasionally, but I tried to project confidence. This was my chance to not just speak for myself, but perhaps for others who'd faced similar betrayals. At the end, Rachel gave a somber nod. Thank you, Mrs. Davenport. Your story is heartbreaking, but also inspiring. Do you have any message you want to send to your son right now? The question caught me off guard. A lump formed in my throat. I had so many emotions swirling: anger, sadness, heartbreak. Yet in that moment, I realized something beneath the fury and betrayal. There was still a mother's love, battered but alive. My voice trembled. I want Adrian to know that I love him. I always have. But what he did was wrong, and I won't just roll over and disappear. I deserve respect, and I deserve to keep what I worked so hard for Adrian. If you see this, I hope you recognize the pain you've caused and find a way to make it right. When the interview ended, I felt hollowed out, as if I'd just peeled back my soul for the world to see. But I also felt cleansed in a way. I was confronting the truth head on, not hiding in shame. 2 days later, the segment aired on local news. It was short, only a couple of minutes, but it packed a punch. My tearful recounting, a graphic showing mother evicted on Mother's Day, and a brief commentary from the anchor about elder financial abuse. The community reaction was swift. My phone rang off the hook. People left messages of support, empathy, even outrage directed at Adrian. Some offered free legal advice or pointed me to nonprofits that protect seniors. Amid the wave of calls and texts, one message stood out. It came from an unknown number, but the text read simply, "Stop this or you'll regret it." My stomach lurched. Could it be Adrian or someone connected to him? Fear clashed with my newfound courage. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a random troll, but a sense of unease lodged in my chest. When I showed the message to the Perezes, Mr. Perez frowned. This sounds like a threat. Should we report it to the police? The thought of filing a complaint against my own son, if he indeed sent it, sickened me. But maybe it was time to consider that possibility. I decided to contact John Johnston, the legal aid lawyer, just to let him know. He advised me to keep the text as evidence in case I needed it later. He also mentioned that as my story gains exposure, some pushback is almost inevitable. That night, I found myself unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the day Adrian was born, how I'd cried tears of joy holding him in my arms. Never did I imagine that baby boy would one day send me a message like that. I tried to cling to hope that it might not be him, that maybe he wasn't so far gone. Still, the next morning, I received a call from a high school friend of Adrian's. His name was Derek. I remembered him vaguely as the boy who used to come over and play video games in our living room. "Mrs. D, it's Derek. Look, I don't know if this helps, but Adrian's been in a bad way for months," Derek explained. He invested in some risky crypto stuff, lost a bunch of money, and then borrowed from loan sharks. I tried telling him to slow down, but he wouldn't listen. He's desperate. My heart squeezed. Desperate enough to steal from his own mother. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. He sighed. "I just wanted you to know the real reason he's doing all this. He's not thinking straight." I hung up feeling a mix of pity and anger. If Adrian was truly dealing with dangerous debts, that might explain his actions, but it didn't excuse them. In the meantime, the house was still on the market. I'd driven by once more, seeing prospective buyers stepping onto the porch. I'd painted sky blue. It twisted my insides to watch them peer into the windows, evaluating the place like a commodity. Did they even notice the faded handprints on the side of the garage, where Adrian and I once repainted it together? Probably not. This was my life, my memories, and Adrian had thrown it all up for sale to cover his reckless debts. That evening, I prayed. I wasn't a particularly religious person, but I whispered to whatever higher power might exist, give me the strength to do what's right. Whatever that is, if there's any chance to salvage my relationship with Adrian, show me how. But if not, help me find peace. I fell asleep with tears on my pillow, the heaviness of unresolved conflict pulling me into fitful dreams. I saw Adrian as a little boy again, running around the yard squealing with laughter. Then he vanished, replaced by the grown man who locked me out in the rain. I woke on Saturday to the sound of my phone buzzing. The caller ID showed Rebecca Hall, the reporter from the Riverton Weekly Gazette who had interviewed me earlier. Hi, Anna, I'm calling to let you know. Our piece on your story is set to publish on Sunday. We're doing an online feature plus a small front page mention, she said. My heart skipped. Front page, that could really shake things up. Thank you, Rebecca. I truly appreciate all you've done. She hesitated. Don't be surprised if you get more media inquiries after this. It's a compelling story. Mother's Day betrayal. Possible elder financial abuse. People have strong reactions. After I hung up, I sat with the Perezes in their living room, explaining what might happen next. They were supportive, reassuring me they'd stand by me. I felt immense gratitude, but also anxiety. Going front page meant publicity scrutiny, and who knew what else from Adrian's side? That same afternoon, a knock on the door startled us. Mr. Perez opened it, revealing a tall, gray-haired man with a gentle demeanor. May I help you? Mr. Perez asked, his guard up. The man introduced himself as Pastor Samuel from a local church. He held a small pamphlet that read, We stand with our community. I came to speak with Mrs. Davenport, he said softly. I hope I'm not intruding. I stepped forward, perplexed. I'm Anna Davenport. He gave a sympathetic smile. I saw your story on the TV segment. It touched me deeply. Our church helps people in crisis, especially seniors who face neglect or abandonment. I wanted to offer any assistance we can provide: temporary housing counseling, financial advice, that sort of thing. Tears stung my eyes. Thank you, Pastor. I'm currently staying with my neighbors, but I appreciate the offer. He nodded. Well, if you need anything from legal resources to emotional support, here's my card. My congregation has dealt with similar situations before. You're not alone. I took the card, moved by his kindness. In a strange way, being evicted had led me to discover the depth of compassion in people I barely knew. As the days rolled on, Sunday approached. I barely slept. Saturday night consumed by nerves about the upcoming article. Early Sunday morning, I rushed to the nearest newsstand. Sure enough, there it was, a headline on the front page, Betrayed on Mother's Day. Local mothers fight for her home. My own eyes stared back from a small photo. Beneath it, the text teased the story, Anna Davenport never imagined her own son would evict her. The full piece ran on page 4, spanning half a page with more photos. Rebecca had quoted me extensively, interspersed with commentary on elder abuse laws. It was both surreal and heartbreaking. My life had become public fodder. Within hours, my phone rang again. This time it was a local official who worked with an elder advocacy group offering to see if they could push for an investigation. Then an old high school friend called, outraged at Adrian. My social media notifications were exploding. Among the well wishes, a few cynical comments called me gullible or questioned if I was making it all up for attention. Each one stung, but I tried to focus on the supportive voices. Late that afternoon, I got a text from Adrian. We need to talk. Meet me at Tanner Park 6 p.m. Come alone. A lump formed in my throat. Was this a trick or was he finally ready to talk things through? I told the Perezes where I was going just in case. Tanner Park was a spacious area with a pond playground and winding footpaths. I arrived a few minutes early, nerves taut like piano strings. I spotted Adrian sitting on a bench, overlooking the water. He wore sunglasses even though dusk was approaching, as if he didn't want anyone to recognize him. I approached cautiously. He didn't stand up or greet me, just said in a low voice, "Mom." Sitting down at the opposite end of the bench, I swallowed hard. Adrian. Silence hung between us like a storm cloud. My heart pounded, half expecting him to lash out or scold me for going public. He finally spoke. "Why are you doing this?" My anger flared. "You're asking me why I'm doing this. You kicked me out of my own home on Mother's Day." Adrian, he took off his sunglasses, revealing bloodshot eyes. "You're turning the entire town against me. I can't even open my social media without seeing hateful comments. My phone won't stop ringing." I clenched my fists. "What did you expect me to do? Lie down and accept being homeless while you sold my house?" He exhaled, looking away. "You always taught me to handle things privately. Now you're dragging our dirty laundry for everyone to see?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "Yes, I did teach you that, but you gave me no choice. Legally, I have almost no recourse. You made sure of that with your fancy paperwork." He raked a hand through his hair, his face twisting in frustration. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who used to run to me crying after scraping his knee. The maternal urge in me ached to comfort him, but I reminded myself of the betrayal. "You don't know what it's like," he muttered. "I'm drowning in debt. I borrowed money from some bad people. They threatened me. I had no other option." I shook my head. "There's always another option, Adrian. You could have come to me openly. We could have figured something out, but you chose to trick me to steal my house. Did you even stop to consider what that would do to me?" He rubbed his face. "I didn't want to hurt you. I planned to. I don't know. Maybe I'd pay you back once I got on my feet again." My tears brimmed. "Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? Do you think you can just snap your fingers and give me back years of my life's work?" He fell silent. A breeze rustled the leaves carrying the scent of freshly mowed grass. Children's laughter rang out from the nearby playground, a cruel reminder of happier days. Finally, Adrian spoke in a broken voice. "Look, I'm sorry, okay, but you need to stop going on TV and talking to newspapers. It's ruining my reputation. I could lose my job." My jaw set. "I'll stop when I get justice." "Adrian, when you do the right thing. Until then, I have no reason to be silent." He stared at the pond, tears gathering in his eyes. He swallowed hard, nodded once, then stood up. "Fine, if that's how it is. Don't say I didn't warn you." Without another word, he walked away, leaving me trembling on the bench. My mind swirled with 1,000 thoughts, his regret, his self-pity, his threats. So he was sorry, but only enough to want me silent. I sat there for a long time watching the sun dip below the horizon. A heaviness pressed against my chest. Adrian's confession about the debt made me pity him, but it didn't excuse what he'd done. Eventually, I returned to the Perez's place, numb and exhausted. I knew I was closer to some kind of breaking point, but I wasn't sure if that meant a resolution or an escalation. On Monday morning, I woke to a notification that shook me. The Riverton Weekly Gazette piece had gone viral, reshared by a larger news aggregator in the region. My face was all over the internet with headlines like, "Son Evicts Mother, a Modern Tragedy." My phone rang incessantly. Strangers reached out with messages of solidarity. Some offered donations, though I wasn't sure how to handle the idea of taking money from people I'd never met. Others shared their own stories of betrayal. A father scammed by his daughter. A grandmother left in a nursing home by ungrateful grandchildren. Each story weighed on me, but also reminded me I wasn't alone in this painful reality. I also received calls from 2 different law offices offering pro bono or reduced fee help. It seemed the wave of publicity had gotten the attention of advocates who wanted to champion my cause. I set up appointments to discuss my case, feeling a glimmer of hope rise again. Meanwhile, the Perez's small guest room was starting to feel cramped, and I worried about overstaying my welcome. They insisted I could remain as long as needed, but I saw the strain. They had grandchildren who visited on weekends, and their once peaceful home was now a hub of phone calls and door knocks from reporters. One afternoon, while I was out front watering Mrs. Perez's hydrangeas to repay their kindness, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. A tall, wiry man stepped out wearing a crisp suit and holding a briefcase. My heart lurched. He looked like one of those legal sharks you'd see on TV dramas. He walked straight to me, Mrs. Davenport. I set the watering can aside. Yes, I'm Dylan Chambers, legal counsel for Adrian Davenport. My pulse spiked. All right, I said, bracing myself. What do you want? He cleared his throat, glancing around the yard as though he found it distasteful. I've been authorized to present you with a settlement offer. If you agree to retract your public statements and refrain from further media appearances, Adrian is willing to pay you a certain sum in exchange for relinquishing all claims on the property. A fierce anger boiled in my veins. He took my home, and now he wants me to be silent for some hush money. Mr. Chambers kept his face impassive. Adrian claims you signed over the property voluntarily, so he's not obligated to do anything. This is a gesture of goodwill to help you move on. He's offering $30,000. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. $30,000 that might not even cover a year's rent in some parts of town, let alone make up for my home's value. My house is worth far more than that, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. This isn't just about the money, it's about justice. The lawyer gave a small shrug. That's his offer. I suggest you think it over, because if you continue your public campaign, we'll have to consider a defamation suit. I stared at him. Defamation. Everything I've said is true. I have evidence. His expression tightened. That may be so, but we have resources and we're prepared to protect Adrian's reputation. The sheer audacity left me speechless. My son was threatening to sue me for defamation after he'd taken everything I owned. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I'll pass. I finally managed. Please leave. He nodded curtly, pulled a crisp envelope from his briefcase, and held it out. In case you change your mind, the details are in here. The offer stands for 1 week. I didn't touch the envelope. After a moment's awkward pause, he set it on the porch railing, walked back to his car, and drove off. Inside, my hands trembled with anger as I recounted the exchange to the Perezes. Mr. Perez cursed under his breath. That's blackmail, plain and simple, he said. Mrs. Perez squeezed my hand. $30,000 is nothing compared to losing your home. Tears pricked my eyes. It's not even about the money. I'm outraged he thinks I can be bought off so cheaply. And the defamation threat, I can't believe this. For the rest of the day, I wrestled with swirling emotions, rage, betrayal, heartbreak. Adrian's desperation must be growing, or he wouldn't resort to a lawyer's intimidation. But could I withstand the pressure if he truly sued me? The next morning, I drove out to meet one of the law offices that had offered help. Hart and Avery Advocates, a modest firm known for handling elder care cases. A young but sharp attorney named Melissa Hart met me in a conference room, her expression poised and confident. I relayed the entire story from the moment I signed the trust documents to the settlement offer. Melissa took notes meticulously, occasionally stopping me to clarify details. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. We have a few avenues to explore. Defamation isn't a real threat if everything you've stated is true. And we can push the angle of elder financial abuse given that you're a senior, and the potential for undue influence was there. My heart soared. So, I might have a case. Melissa nodded. Yes, but it won't be easy. We'll need to demonstrate that Adrian manipulated or coerced you into signing those papers without full understanding. That means collecting testimonies from people who can attest to your relationship dynamic, your intention for the house, and your mental state. I felt a weight lift, replaced by a cautious hope. I can do that. My neighbors, my relatives, they all knew I never meant to give the house away. Melissa smiled. Excellent. We'll also want to see if there was any pattern of exploitation. For instance, did Adrian frequently borrow large sums of money or manipulate you into financial decisions prior to this? Memories flashed of all the times Adrian sweet-talked me into co-signing loans, giving him investments that never materialized. Yes, I can provide records of that. She nodded again, jotting notes. This strengthens our case. However, be prepared for a lengthy battle. The outcome could hinge on a judge's interpretation, or we might persuade Adrian to settle in a more equitable way. If a lawsuit occurs, it's going to be tough on you emotionally. I glanced down at my trembling hands. I understand, but I need to stand up for myself. Melissa reached across the table and patted my hand gently. We'll do our best to help you. Our firm has taken on high-profile cases before, and the public attention might actually work in your favor. Sometimes shining a spotlight on this kind of issue pushes the other party to negotiate. On the drive back to the Perez's house, a whirlwind of anxiety and relief filled me. I actually had a legal team willing to fight for me. It felt surreal, like for once I was no longer alone in this battle. That evening, I emailed Melissa everything I could gather, old emails and texts from Adrian asking for loans, bank statements showing money transfers, even pictures of the two of us hugging in front of the house back when it was first purchased. Step by step, I was assembling a fortress of evidence. My mind spun with the possibilities. If a lawsuit occurred, would Adrian show up in court to face me? Could we settle without a trial? Would the media coverage intensify or fade away? There were so many unknowns, but one thing was certain. Adrian's measly settlement offer and threat of defamation only steeled my resolve. I wasn't going to let him walk away with my home unscathed. My final gift to him wouldn't be my silence or my compliance. It would be a wake-up call, a moral lesson he'd never forget. A swirl of events kicked off the following week. Melissa Hart officially sent a letter of representation to Adrian's lawyer, rejecting the $30,000 offer and indicating we were exploring legal action. Almost immediately, I received a barrage of angry voicemails and texts from Adrian. Mom, what are you doing? This is insane. You're letting these lawyers fill your head with nonsense. You're going to bankrupt me. Each message caused my heart to clench. This was the same boy I once tucked in at night, reassuring him that monsters under the bed weren't real. Now we were adversaries. As painful as it was, I held firm. I forwarded all communication to Melissa, who advised me not to respond directly. Meanwhile, the Riverton Weekly Gazette published an update on my case. The reporter Rebecca Hall interviewed Melissa about the potential elder abuse angle. The piece gained traction online, fueling public outrage in my favor. The crowning moment came when the local TV station invited both me and Adrian to join a live panel discussion on elder financial abuse. They wanted a face-to-face confrontation. My gut wrenched at the idea, but part of me felt it could be an opportunity for Adrian to apologize or at least come to his senses. Maybe if he saw the emotional toll on me in person, he might relent. I sent the invitation to Adrian's lawyer, not expecting a reply. Surprisingly, they accepted. The program was scheduled for Thursday evening. When the night arrived, I wore a simple navy blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Perez and tried to steady my nerves. The TV studio lights felt even more glaring than the last time. A host with a warm demeanor introduced me as Anna Davenport, the mother at the center of a heated local controversy. Then Adrian appeared on the set, accompanied by Mr. Chambers. My stomach lurched at the sight of him. He looked gaunt, dark circles under his eyes, a far cry from the confident corporate professional I'd known. Could guilt be gnawing at him, or was it just the pressure from his debts? The host asked me to summarize my situation. I spoke in a steady voice, recounting how I'd scrimped to afford the house, how Adrian convinced me to sign the trust, and how he evicted me on Mother's Day. Then it was Adrian's turn. He shifted uncomfortably. My mother signed those papers of her own free will. I never forced her. She might have misunderstood, but that's not my fault. My chest tightened. You lied, Adrian. You said it was to protect the house for the family, not to hand it over to you entirely. He looked away. I needed money, and she has no retirement plan. I thought maybe selling the house would benefit both of us in the long run. I let out a mirthless laugh. Benefit us by leaving me homeless. The host intervened with a calm question about possible reconciliation. Adrian tensed, glancing at Mr. Chambers, who nodded curtly. Then Adrian inhaled and spoke. I'm willing to give her some compensation, much more than the original offer, if she'll stop this public smear campaign. I don't want her on the streets. She's my mother. But the house is in my name now legally. Rage simmered under my skin. Your name, yes, but only because you deceived me. And this isn't a smear campaign, it's the truth. Before Adrian could respond, the host turned to a small monitor showing incoming viewer messages. Many were supportive of me, condemning Adrian's actions. One message read, I can't believe a son would do this to his mother. He deserves jail time. Adrian's face hardened, and I could see the anger rising. Look, I never wanted it to be like this. He paused, voice catching. Then he swallowed. Fine, let's talk about the truth. My mother was always overprotective. She insisted on paying for everything even when I offered to help. She made me dependent on her. Now I'm just trying to break free. That accusation felt like a slap. Is that what you call it? Breaking free by stealing my home. Adrian, you're twisting reality to justify your greed. His lawyer chimed in. We maintain that Miss Davenport was aware of her actions. This entire fiasco is an attempt to pressure my client into giving her a windfall. I clenched my jaw. A windfall. It's my life savings, you heartless. The host quickly cut to a commercial break, tension sizzling in the air. As soon as the cameras were off, Adrian stood and stormed out of the studio, Mr. Chambers in tow. I sat there trembling from the confrontation, tears burning in my eyes. The segment resumed with only me and the host, who apologized for the heated exchange. I managed to regain my composure just enough to deliver a final statement. I'm fighting for what's rightfully mine. It's not just about property, it's about respect and the sanctity of a mother's love. I hope Adrian can find a way to make amends, but until then I can't be silent. After that tumultuous broadcast, I drove home with my emotions in a tangled knot. The confrontation had solved nothing. If anything, it escalated the animosity. Now the entire town knew how deep the rift ran. That night, lying on the guest room bed, I wondered if I'd made the right choice confronting Adrian on live television. Public opinion might be on my side, but I'd never felt more heartsick. Memories of Adrian as a smiling toddler pricked at my conscience. Could I have raised him differently? Was there a point where I could have taught him stronger ethics, a better moral compass? Then I reminded myself, he is an adult who made his choices. The blame couldn't rest entirely on my shoulders. As if the universe wanted to underscore my resolve, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Hart and Avery Advocates, subject line, draft complaint. They were preparing to file an official lawsuit against Adrian, alleging fraud and undue influence. I read it over, a mixture of relief and sorrow swirling within me. If I signed these papers, I would be declaring open war. Even if I won, the relationship with my son might be irrevocably destroyed. But perhaps it already was. I pressed my thumb to the phone screen, tears trailing down my cheeks. Then, with a trembling resolve, I replied to Melissa, I'm ready to move forward. In the weeks that followed, events snowballed quickly. Melissa Hart filed the formal complaint and the local court scheduled a preliminary hearing. The news flared with headlines like Mother Sue's son over house dispute and elder abuse allegations and high-profile family feud. Adrian's lawyer responded with a countersuit alleging defamation and emotional distress. The day I received the summons, I felt my knees buckle beneath me. Was he seriously accusing me of causing him emotional distress after what he'd done? Thankfully, Melissa reassured me that such countersuits are common scare tactics. Still, it rattled me. I spent sleepless nights envisioning the worst, losing my legal battle being saddled with court fees. I couldn't pay forced to watch from afar as Adrian sold my home to strangers. But every morning, I woke to find a new wave of supportive messages from neighbors, acquaintances, even random people online who discovered my story. Some offered small donations, urging me to set up a fund. Though I felt uncomfortable taking money, Melissa said it could help cover legal expenses. So I set up a modest crowdfunding page, clarifying that any unused funds would be donated to elder abuse awareness organizations. The outpouring of generosity was humbling to say the least. Finally, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. I dressed carefully in a plain gray suit, borrowed from Sylvia Patterson, pinned my hair back, and stood before the mirror. Heart pounding, the reflection that gazed back at me showed an older woman with tired eyes, but there was a steely determination there as well. At the courthouse, cameras flashed as soon as I stepped out of my car. A small throng of reporters called my name, hurling questions about the hearing. I kept my head high, walking steadily into the building with Melissa by my side. Adrian was already inside, seated at the defendant's table with Mr. Chambers. He wore a dark suit, shoulders hunched, eyes hollowed by stress. For a brief moment, our gazes met. A swirl of memories flooded me. His birth, his graduation, the first time he drove the old sedan. My heart twisted painfully. The hearing itself was a formal proceeding where the judge would decide if our lawsuit and the countersuit could move forward or if mediation was warranted. Melissa presented our case succinctly, highlighting potential undue influence. The lack of clarity around the trust documents and Adrian's eviction of me on Mother's Day. Mr. Chambers retorted that I had signed willingly and was now defaming Adrian to extract more money. As the judge listened, his brow furrowed. At one point, he asked Mr. Chambers, "So you're telling me Ms. Davenport is lying about being misled?" Mr. Chambers hedged. "She may have misunderstood, Your Honor. But misunderstanding is not grounds for fraud," Melissa countered. Her advanced age, the manipulative context, and the emotional relationship at play all suggest possible undue influence. We also have evidence of repeated financial exploitation prior to the trust signing. After an hour of back and forth, the judge leaned over his bench. Hands clasped, "I'm inclined to set a trial date, but I also want you both to consider mediation. This is a family matter. It might be in everyone's best interest to settle before we reach a full-blown trial. Are you open to mediation?" Melissa exchanged a glance with me. I nodded slightly. "Yes, Your Honor, we're open to that." Mr. Chambers also nodded, though less enthusiastically. "We'll consider it." Thus, a mediation session was scheduled for the following week. As we left the courtroom, the reporters pounced again, snapping photos, shouting questions. Melissa guided me past them while Adrian slipped out a side door, head down. A few days later, we gathered in a neutral office building for mediation. The mediator, a calm woman with a soothing voice, explained, "We'd try to find common ground." We sat around a large table. Me, Adrian, our respective lawyers, and the mediator. I stared at Adrian across the table. My chest felt tight. Here was my son, flesh of my flesh, yet I hardly recognized him. Could we really mend the gaping rift that had torn us apart? The mediator asked me to speak first. I inhaled shakily, tears already pricking my eyes. "I want my home back, or at least fair compensation for it." I also want Adrian to acknowledge what he did was wrong. I love my son, but I can't just forget everything that happened. Adrian's jaw tightened. I need money to clear my debts. I'm willing to give my mother some percentage from the house sale, more than I initially offered, but I can't just sign it over. I'll be ruined. My anger flared. You already ruined me. I was left with nowhere to live, forced to beg neighbors for a roof. You sold my security, my memories for your quick cash scheme. He looked away, fiddling with his tie. It wasn't, Mom, I didn't mean for it to get this bad. The mediator intervened, trying to calm the tension. Hours passed in a blur of proposals, arguments, tears. At one point, we broke into separate rooms so the mediator could shuttle back and forth trying to find a middle ground. Eventually, a tentative proposal emerged. Adrian agreed to pay me a substantial lump sum, close to the actual market value of the house, within 6 months. In return, I dropped the lawsuit. The house would remain in Adrian's name, but if he failed to pay by the deadline, the trust would revert the property back to me. Melissa, reviewing the agreement, whispered to me, "This is actually quite favorable given how the trust was structured. You'd be getting either near full compensation or the house." My heart clenched. I wanted my home, not just money, but I saw the exhaustion in Adrian's face, the guilt lurking behind his eyes. If we went to trial, it could drag on for months or years, draining whatever funds we both had. Did I have the strength for that? I looked at Adrian. Will you be able to get the money? What if you default? He swallowed, eyes downcast. I'll try. If I can't, then you get the house back. You have my word, his word. Once that meant the world to me. Now it felt fragile, but I sensed a hint of sincerity. Maybe he'd realized the depth of his wrongdoing at least enough to try to fix it. With a trembling hand, I signed the mediation agreement. Adrian signed too. It was done. The mediator gave a relieved smile. I hope this can begin to heal the divide in your family. Outside the office, Adrian lingered as if wanting to say something. Our lawyer stepped away, giving us space. For a moment, we stood there awkwardly. Finally, he spoke softly. Mom, I'm sorry. I studied his face. There was a crack in his stoic mask. Real remorse. I hope you mean that, I whispered. He nodded, tears bright in his eyes. Then he walked away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with a swirl of relief, sadness, and an unfamiliar sense of closure. I'd spent weeks fighting tooth and nail, never imagining we'd reach any sort of agreement. While it wasn't a perfect resolution, I still felt the sting of betrayal. I also felt lighter. Maybe in time I could forgive him. That evening, I returned to the Perez's and shared the news. They hugged me, celebrating that I'd finally gotten some justice. A sense of finality washed over me. Whether Adrian paid up or defaulted, I'd no longer be living under a cloud of legal uncertainty. And in that fragile calm, I realized that my final gift to Adrian wasn't letting him walk over me. It was teaching him that even a mother's love has boundaries and that betraying it comes with a price. As for me, I would begin the slow process of rebuilding my finances, my home, whatever or wherever that might be, and maybe someday a cautious relationship with my son. Perhaps that was the real Mother's Day gift. After all the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for my own dignity, and I could still hold on to hope, however faint, that Adrian might learn from his mistakes and become the son I once knew.